Get ready for the most hair-raising, rip-roaring, rocket-launching romp across the universe. Or should I say, the Looniverse.
I'm not sure if it's just me, but around the time of the millennium, or should I say mil-looney-um, a great deal of marketing around the Looney Tunes seemed bizarrely enamored with the concept of the Looney Tunes in space.
Silly Earthlings.
Case in point, this official annual was released to commemorate the millennium, and maintains a prominent space theme throughout. And yet as much as this theme is emphasized, there is not one advertisement for any of the Looney Tunes video games released during this era, despite their notable emphasis on the sci-fi genre. The year 2000 saw the Looney Tunes' first foray into the world of kart racing with the release of 2 games. The vastly underrated CTR-inspired Looney Tunes Racing for PlayStation 1 and Looney Tunes Space Race for the Dreamcast. It's especially odd that the annual does not acknowledge the latter in any form, particularly since the term space race is used. The space theme might have been entirely coincidental here, but it's still kind of surprising that they didn't connect the dots. Also, since both games were released around the same time, you'd expect one would advertise the other, either in the game manual or in the game itself. But nope, there is no mention of space racing Looney Tunes Racing and vice versa.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
In any case, despite some glaring missed opportunities in terms of marketing, the original Dreamcast game nonetheless proved fairly popular among audiences. Following the discontinuation of the Dreamcast in 2001, Space Race enjoyed further success as a new adaptation was developed for the PS2 and released the following year.
Hooray for the rabbit.
This version is essentially the same, but boasts some minor differences.
Brace yourself, Earthling.
Mostly related to the menus, the game interface, and the music.
Them boys got no get up and go.
The graphics too aren't quite as sharp as in the original. Otherwise, however, the game is pretty much the same. And since this channel is so far devoted to reviewing PlayStation games alone, this latter release is the version I'll be covering today.
Here we go.
On your marks, get set, blast off!
Welcome. I say welcome to the most spectacular racing extravaganza in the universe. The Looney Tunes Space Race.
The race is presented by the loquacious rooster Foghorn Leghorn, accompanied by on-site reporter Lola Bunny.
Hello, is this thing on?
Whose relevance Warner Brothers were desperately trying to maintain despite bearing no interesting character or memorable quirks whatsoever.
Oh, come on, pick me.
Her sex appeal has been notably downplayed since her debut in Space Jam, which is great and all, but it means there's essentially nothing left of her.
She's genuinely just bunny boobs. That is literally the extent of her character.
So who's it gonna be?
There are initially 6 playable characters to choose from, and these are Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Sylvester, Wile E. Coyote, Yosemite Sam, and Elmer Fudd. They all have their own uniquely designed karts, which I find pretty cool, especially Bugs Bunny's carrot-like kart and Wile E. Coyote's red rocket. Kind of reminiscent of their karts in Looney Tunes Racing. Meanwhile, the game itself is split into various locations. First there's Planet Acme, home to all the zany and outlandish Acme products, which sounds cool, but it's basically like a planet-sized warehouse.
Not what I'd call the looniest of locations, but alright.
That's not to mention it's home to all the Acme boxes. So this is where they're manufactured, eh? Fascinating stuff. Then there's the Pyramids of Mars, which adopts a much more colourful shade of, purple.
What? Purple? I thought this was meant to be the red planet.
Really, I honestly find the colour palette here a strange choice. It makes me question why they didn't just make this Planet X, being as this is already a pre-existing purple planet in the Looney Tunes canon.
I claim this planet in the name of the Earth.
Other tracks include the Asteroid Belt, Galactorama Park, Off-World City Limits, the Wild West Quadrant, the Nebula, and finally there's the North Pole Star, which is basically the snowy level.
Almost every racing game in existence has one of these, I swear to God. Every single one.
As you would naturally expect from the Looney Tunes, the races are filled to the brim with gags galore. This might sound as though it has the potential to be an irritating, unplayable disaster, but the controls handle surprisingly well. As you progress in the game, you earn tokens. If you finish a single race in first place, or you manage to beat your own time completing a lap in the time trial, you're rewarded with 5 tokens. But in order to amass more tokens, you're far better off playing through the tournaments, as the tokens you earn increase exponentially as you progress to tougher levels. My criticism here is that there really doesn't seem to be much logic to the sharp increase in tokens rewarded. For example, completing a cup in the first tournament rewards you with either 5 or 10 tokens, but by the end of the second tournament, you're eventually rewarded with up to 5,500 tokens, and later tournaments see even greater payouts, with the final race rewarding you with a whopping 1 million tokens. I'm not complaining, but why bother even rewarding me with a measly 5 tokens after completing a single race when beating the tournament is so much more lucrative?
Step right up and spend your token.
Anyway, what do you do with all these tokens? Well, you can purchase new items in the main menu, including concept art and blueprints for Gags, Karts and Tracks, unique character animations,
Yeah, your brother drinks pickle juice.
and new gags to use during the races.
Well, tie me to an ant's nest and smear my ears with jam.
There are also 3 bonus characters to unlock, which is cool.
Are you sure? Sold.
Although why Porky Pig is always relegated to bonus character status, I'll never know. Seriously, he's the oldest member of the current Looney Tunes squad at this point. This is a gross injustice.
You can all go to somewhere bad.
Then there's Marvin the Martian in his saucer, which I personally am not keen on as it struggles to turn sharply, so I never actually play as him.
First person go home.
Now, Marvin, this might be Space Race, but there's no need for space racism.
The remaining character is the King of the Instant Martians. He costs a great deal of tokens, and I really don't know why. Sure, he's fast, but I don't know. I seem to have the opposite problem with him that I did with Marvin, as he seems to turn too sharply.
Yes, I know, I'm never satisfied. I'm always complaining. I'm the worst person to watch a movie with, honestly.
You looking for a fat lip knucklehead?
Probably my favourite character to play as is Sylvester, purely because he sounds constantly pissed off, and this amuses me greatly.
Back off!
What did you just say?
Back off!
Fuck off! This guy doesn't censor himself for anyone.
Back off!
Dude, you realise this is a kid's game, right? You can lose your whole career over something like this. Look what happened to Pepe Le Pew after all those allegations. Good luck landing on your feet after this one, Puddy Tat.
I can't stand it.
I really don't know why Porky is in his farmer costume. Like, I get that he's very occasionally worn this outfit before, but very rarely, and it feels really out of place here. His vehicle even seems to look like a tractor, and why does he have a hat when he doesn't usually?
I tip my hat to you, but I haven't got a hat.
Wouldn't it have made more sense to have the characters in their pre-existing space costumes? Like, why isn't Porky in his eager young space cadet costume? Or Daffy in his Duck Dodger suit?
Well, I wish you'd explain it to me sometime, Buster.
You could also have Sam and Bugs in their outer space outfits too. Not that this matters at all, I just figured it would be a nice touch. Regardless, it doesn't affect the gameplay, which is the important thing.
Mark, get set, go. And they're off.
Speaking of which, the controls are pretty simple. To accelerate, you need to hold R1, and to brake and reverse, you hold L1. Should you find yourself veering off the track, or if you need to avoid being crushed by a falling object, trust me, this happens a lot, you can also dodge to the left and right using L2 and R2 respectively. It takes some getting used to, but this is actually very effective, and especially satisfying if you time it just right. In later tracks it can be quite hard to use effectively, as the jump is very abrupt and covers a lot of ground, and considering how narrow the tracks are in later stages, it's easy to inadvertently jump off the edge. It was also kind of amusing when I initially confused the R1 and R2 buttons, and mistakenly jumped off the track at the very beginning of the race. Yeah, it basically looks like I sacrificed myself.
No, there's no hope I'll never win. Goodbye, cruel world.
Collecting cans of gas fills a gauge in the bottom corner. As soon as you've collected enough cans so that the meter becomes fully illuminated, you can use a speed boost with the circle button. But be warned, unless you're extremely dexterous, I recommend using this only on a straight stretch of road, or you'll find this slows you down more than it speeds you up.
I guess that's what you call falling hair.
As you'd expect from a Looney Tunes game, and basically any good kart racing game, the tracks are littered with gags. Collecting these Acme crates gives the player a random gag. To use it, you press the X button, and if you wish to dispose of it, you press the square button. And if you get hit by a gag yourself, sometimes Foghorn or Lola pop up on screen and basically mock you for being terrible.
Oh, no, you're doing it all wrong.
Oh, piss off, you cock. What? He is a cock.
The gags range from ball bombs and homing kablooey rockets to remote-controlled falling objects to target the races in front of you, including weights, anvils, and even pianos.
Now that's what I call a smash hit.
I like to bombardier.
You can even sometimes drop an elephant on fellow racers.
That was painful.
Whoa, Nelly!
Nah, I don't think that was Nelly. If it fell from the sky, it's more than likely Dumbo.
There are also various items you can leave behind to slow down the racers behind you, such as hair oil and fake Acme crates that explode on impact.
Now what's going on now?
I think it's commendable that several of these gags are derived from the cartoons. I especially like the creative idea of a portable hole that you can leave behind you, causing fellow racers to plummet off the track. Not only is this inspired by a gag seen in the Roadrunner cartoons, but this also pays homage to an entire episode dedicated to the concept of a portable hole, titled The Hole Idea. I did wonder if Marvin's cart might be able to fly over these holes, being as it's a flying saucer and all.
Spoiler alert, it does not.
The boxing glove is an interesting gag in that it's not always a hindrance to you if you get hit. You can actually use it to your advantage to help propel yourself forwards. If there's one positive thing all these Looney Tunes games have in common, it's that the people behind them really know their Looney Tunes. The games are always chock full of references, and with all the clever gags utilized in the game, I would argue that this is one of the best games to truly capture the sheer looniness of the Looney Tunes. Sure, LTR features a variety of amusing gags, but this game aptly conveys the chaotic nature of their universe. What's more, this game poses much more of a challenge compared to its PS1 counterpart, and if you're up for even more of a challenge, you get to increase the difficulty. While the AI-controlled racers in Looney Tunes Racing can be somewhat slow and easy to beat, the racers here are much more competent. The gags too are a greater detriment to you. While in Looney Tunes Racing they pose a mild inconvenience, being subjected to just one gag here can cost you the race, and it can sometimes even see you drop from first place to last place in a matter of seconds. Now and again, the gag crates will give you a 4-leaf clover, which basically acts a similar way to the invulnerability dust in LTR. This protects you from all hazards, besides falling off the track of course, and it also makes other racers spin out when you drive into them.
Oh, Pa, who needs a clover when I'm Bugs Bunny? I always win. Must be my lucky rabbit's feet.
Barbecue my ham hocks.
Yeah, I think I'll take that clover, thanks.
Ooh, that's smart.
If you're bored of the standard races, there are also Acme events, in which you race against your opponents in, very unique situations. Oh look, there's an event called Duck. I wonder what this is.
I guess I'll play as Daffy. After all, he is a duck. This could be the race for him, and I'm feeling like a lucky duck today.
On your marks, get set, go! And they're off!
Oh dear God, what's happening?
Indeed, this race sees you having to complete the race at the same time as having to avoid all the heavy objects that are constantly raining from the sky. I don't feel like a lucky duck anymore.
I'm so sorry, Daffy! Oh well, that's that then. Press duck, anyone?
Another event sees the track littered with portable holes, although they are somewhat lenient here as the only pickup available is a protective clover.
Believe me, this makes things a whole lot easier.
Another event sees the speed boost gauge constantly fill, meaning you get to use the boost over and over. And there's also the Big Bangaroonie, in which the only gags available are explosive ones, which inevitably means pure chaos, as you're more than likely going to be cooked alive.
I do love a pork roast. This game is making me hungry, is it just me?
The tournaments increase in difficulty fairly. There's a Baby Carrot Tournament, the Super Carrot Tournament, the Mega Carrot Tournament, and finally the Carrot Masters Tournament. The first tournament is by far the easiest, with the opening cup retaining 3 of the easiest races in the game: Planet Acme, the North Pole Star, and the Pyramids of Mars. In these races, the tracks are much more straightforward, so it's very unlikely you'll fall off. Oh, I fell.
I mean, you know, in my defense, I'm not very good.
However, as the tournaments progress, more unique challenges are unveiled.
That boy's got no get up and go.
The conclusion to the first tournament, the Super 6 series, is comprised of 6 races in which you need to finish 1 lap without the use of any gags, while the Super Carrot Tournament's Cuppo Mystery is made up of 3 random surprise tracks. Meanwhile, the Looney Dish and Looney Spoon Cups present you with a series of Acme events, just to shake things up. Speaking of shaking, the Shake, Rattle and Roll event sees you having to finish a race while enduring a powerful earthquake, and this has to be one of the most visually distracting events in the game.
Seriously, having to watch a screen shake like this all the time is really annoying. Wouldn't you agree? Okay, you can stop now. Stop, please, stop. Hello?
As I said earlier, these events are indeed unique and fun, although I wasn't so sure about their occasional appearance in a tournament mode. You could argue that it adds an extra challenge, but sometimes whether you win or lose these events can boil down to sheer luck.
No.
Saying that, if you do fail any track during the tournament, the game is very lenient. As is the case with LTR, you get 3 chances to retry a race. So it's not as though they don't give you a fair amount of opportunities to succeed.
Yahoo! I'm the fastest, blastingest critter west of the Pecos!
The final cup, the Night of 1,000 Tunes, requires you to finish first in 4 races, with the use of only 1 gag unique to that race. For example, in Galactorama Park, you can only use the boxing glove, while in the Wild West quadrant, you can only use kablooey rockets. Naturally, this can make things more difficult, although ironically, in my opinion, these restrictions serve to make the final race easier, as the only gag available is the ability to drop fake pickups behind you. Sure, running into these things slows you down, but if you're quick enough to jump the queue and stay in first place for most of the race, this barely affects you at all. And this is actually quite the relief, considering this track is probably the steepest, most meandering track in the entire game. Also, I really can't explain why, but some parts of this level's dizzying music make my stomach turn. And accompanied with this winding track, I'm actually feeling rather nauseous.
I'm alright.
I only have a few small issues with the game on the whole. Despite the winding nature of the increasingly narrow tracks, most of them are outlined well enough, although there are 1 or 2 tracks that I find incredibly visually confusing. I'm not keen on the 2 Galactorama Park tracks, especially this part when you have to make your way through a mini golf course.
Yay, I got a hole in 1! Oh wait, I'm not playing golf? Silly me.
The exit to the golf course isn't very clearly outlined, and it slows me down every time I pass through. That said, this is one of very few issues I have with a track in the game, which is pretty impressive for a licensed game.
Let's face it, poor level design in these games is, par for the course.
However, I personally think that the biggest issue with this location is that there's a little too much detail visually, to the point where it's sometimes hard to see where the track is going. I'm also not a fan of the asteroid belt, but that's not due to it being visually confusing. The track is simply very narrow and a constant pain to maneuver, and this isn't helped by the positioning of the camera, as you sometimes can't see where the track is headed until it's far too late. A few tracks such as this one see you flying through the air after ascending a ramp, which sounds cool, but you need to ensure you're following the path of the track below or you'll fall and respawn. And preventing this from happening isn't always possible when you're so high up that you can't see the track. Sometimes it looks as though you're going to land just fine, but unexpectedly fall in mid-air. I get why it's happening, as there's no track beneath me, but you'd have thought they'd have granted you some leniency here. This ramp on the first North Pole Star track is frustrating for another reason, however. When you're so high up, the game seems to think you're behind the other racers for some reason, as though you've disappeared from the map. So sometimes when you cross the finish line in first place, it doesn't register. What? No fair! I won that!
I've been hornswoggled, gosh darn it! I demand a rematch!
The best option is to slow down at the very end of the lap to ensure you're on the ground.
Which I obviously don't want to do because it's a race. That's the bloody point.
Another issue I have with the game is that it's far too short. I thought LTR was short, but man, this is even a brief experience compared to that. I mean, I guess this isn't the worst criticism. If anything, it suggests I enjoyed the game so much that I felt it deserved to be longer.
Now who's gonna race this time, boy?
There aren't many characters either. One of the biggest appeals of LTR is its abundance of secret playable bonus characters, most of whom are voiced.
Heavens to Betsy.
There's no such appeal in this game, besides the 3 extra characters you can purchase with the tokens you've earned. And I know this is hard to believe, but even the usually ubiquitous Gossamer didn't receive an invitation this time around.
Praise the almighty Looney Lord! They've stopped inviting this hideous creature! I know, my love. I miss you too.
Interestingly, looking at the concept art for this game, it looks as though Henry Hawk was once considered as one of the racers, which is an interesting but odd choice. When you think of the vast array of prominent Looney Tunes characters, he'd be way down the list of tunes I'd expect to take part.
I don't know why it was scrapped though, as it would have been a nice addition. Perhaps he was disqualified for trying to eat the host.
So anyway, the character selection might be a little limited, but their animations and voice acting are top notch. Well, those who are voiced anyway. As usual, a lot of things they say are inspired by quotes from the cartoons.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, you thing from another world, you.
Now I use my secret weapon.
That's the last straw. Now I use my secret weapon.
And despite the shortage of playable characters, there are a few who make brief cameos. For starters, there's an Acme event titled a Rock and Roll Granny, in which Granny appears as an obstacle, swerving all over the road like the wild and bridled road hog she is, apparently. And in Holy Mackerel, the Tasmanian devil escapes captivity and spins down the track. He's also voiced by Jim Cummings, although his cameo is so brief in this game that it really makes me wonder why they bothered. Oh, and Pepe Le Pew can be seen in the background of one of the Wild West Quadrant levels. I'm not sure why he's here specifically, but hey, it's a neat cameo regardless.
By the way, off topic, I actually find the whole controversy about Pepe Le Pew to be absolutely ridiculous. The joke is that he thinks he's a great lover, but the irony is he stinks. It's funny. It's a joke. Haha. And yet there are morons out there who seem to think he's a predator, like the Harvey Weinstein of the Looney Tunes world. And to you people, I only have one thing to say. Fuck off!
We have a winner!
Upon completing the tournament, the characters are rewarded with and subsequently crushed by a lifetime supply of Acme products.
Somehow I knew that was going to happen.
This is amusing and all, but kind of disappointing to me, as the winner's clip at the end of the tournament is basically the same for each character, besides some very minor dialogue changes.
A lifetime supply of Acme products!
The biggest change is in Bugs' clip, as he manages to avoid getting crushed in typical Bugs fashion.
You gotta try harder than that.
It's also interesting to me that in order to see all these movies, you don't have to complete all the tournaments with each and every character, just the final tournament.
Oh, you'll make me blush.
Another disappointment is that there's only one finishing movie you can purchase, and depending on who you've won the tournament with, whoever appears in this clip will be selected at random whenever you choose to watch it. It would surely have made more sense to unlock one movie for each character, but whatever. This obviously would bother me a lot more if the ending clips were more unique and varied, like in LTR when the winners were granted their own personal wish. Sadly, this does also mean that I think this game has less replay value, in the sense that there's no real incentive to complete the tournament with every single character. For what it is, it's fun, but they could easily have milked it some more and made the end reward more enticing. Regardless of the game's short length, the multiplayer mode is incredibly fun.
Take that, Earthling!
You can't play the Acme events in this mode, but you can play all the single races. It's a shame there aren't more tracks, but those that are there are highly enjoyable to play with 2 players. And if you get bored of the standard races, after having completed the tournament, you get to play the game in mirror mode too.
But the question is, does this game beat Looney Tunes Racing overall? And trust me, it's a tight race.
Hooray for the rabbit!
This is, as usual, a fun outing for the Looney Tunes, and in terms of gameplay alone, I guess it is an improvement on Looney Tunes Racing. The races are far more fast-paced and challenging, while the controls are impressively slick, and as such it does a much better job of capturing the madcap zany spirit of the cartoons. That said, LTR undoubtedly has more variety, with more locations, recognizable references, and an impressive collection of unlockable characters, and for these reasons I prefer it. This game is substantially smaller by comparison, but it's nonetheless a thrill ride from start to finish. The cell shading looks neat, the animations are smooth, and the graphics generally have aged surprisingly well.
I'm the champ! Woohoo! Woohoo! Woohoo!
So in some aspects Space Race soars into the lead, but in other ways it falls short and lags behind its more substantial PS1 counterpart. It's a solid game for sure, but for me personally, it will likely always remain in second place.
That's that race stitched up.
Thanks for watching as always, everyone. I'll be back next time. And there's nothing left for me to say except fuck off!
I tip my hat to you, but I haven't got a hat.
Fuck off!